In the closing years of the 18th century, a narrow strip of land along the eastern edge of North America became the center of a struggle that would reshape the balance of power across the world. 13 British colonies, bound by language, trade, and imperial authority, moved step by step toward open defiance against one of the most formidable empires of the age. What began as a dispute over taxation and governance evolved into a sustained conflict that challenged the very idea of monarchy and imperial control. The outcome would not only determine the fate of those colonies but would introduce a new political experiment whose consequences would extend far beyond its borders. For much of the early 18th century, the relationship between Britain and its American colonies had been relatively stable. The colonies enjoyed a degree of autonomy in their internal affairs, while Britain benefited from their economic output and loyalty. This arrangement, often described by historians as a period of salutary neglect, allowed colonial societies to develop distinct political practices and expectations. Local assemblies exercised authority over taxation and governance, and many colonists came to see these institutions as essential to their rights as English subjects. This balance began to shift after the 7 Years' War, which concluded in 1763. Britain emerged victorious but deeply burdened by debt. Maintaining a large military presence in North America to defend newly acquired territories further strained imperial finances. British officials concluded that the colonies should contribute more directly to the costs of their own defense and administration. This decision marked a turning point. What had once been a loosely managed relationship became more tightly controlled, and with that shift came new forms of taxation and regulation. The introduction of measures such as the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act signaled a new approach. These laws were not merely financial tools, they represented an assertion of parliamentary authority over the colonies. Many colonists did not object to taxation itself but to the principle behind it. They argued that taxation without representation in Parliament violated their rights. Resistance emerged quickly. Protests, boycotts, and organized opposition began to spread through colonial towns and cities. Tensions escalated over the following years. British authorities attempted to enforce compliance, while colonial leaders refined their arguments and methods of resistance. The repeal of some taxes did little to ease underlying concerns. Instead, it reinforced the belief among many colonists that organized resistance could influence imperial policy. At the same time, Britain remained determined to assert its authority, leading to a cycle of action and reaction that deepened mistrust on both sides. By the early 1770s, this tension had become increasingly visible. Incidents such as the confrontation in Boston in 1770, later known as the Boston Massacre, intensified colonial suspicion of British intentions. Though the number of casualties was limited, the event carried symbolic weight. It was used by colonial leaders to illustrate the dangers of standing armies and imperial overreach. Public opinion became more polarized, and calls for unity among the colonies grew stronger. The Tea Act of 1773 and the subsequent protest in Boston Harbor further strained relations. In response, Britain enacted a series of punitive measures aimed at restoring order and authority. These laws, referred to by colonists as the Intolerable Acts, targeted Massachusetts but had broader implications. They altered the governance of the colony, restricted local political activity, and reinforced the presence of British troops. Rather than isolating dissent, these measures encouraged cooperation among the colonies. In 1774, representatives from 12 colonies gathered in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. This assembly did not initially seek independence but aimed to coordinate a response to British policies. Delegates debated strategy, issued statements of rights, and organized economic resistance. The Congress reflected a growing sense of shared identity among the colonies, even as opinions differed on the extent of action required. The situation moved closer to armed conflict in 1775. British forces were tasked with seizing colonial military supplies in Massachusetts. Local militias, aware of these plans, mobilized in response. The resulting confrontations at Lexington and Concord marked the beginning of open hostilities. These engagements were limited in scale but significant in consequence. They demonstrated that the conflict had moved beyond political dispute into armed resistance. Following these events, the Second Continental Congress convened. This body assumed greater responsibility, coordinating military efforts and attempting to manage the escalating crisis. At the same time, there remained hope among some delegates for reconciliation with Britain. This dual approach, preparing for war while seeking resolution, reflected the uncertainty of the moment. As the conflict continued, attitudes shifted. The publication of influential writings, including arguments in favor of independence, contributed to changing perspectives. By mid-1776, the idea of complete separation from Britain had gained broader support. On July 4, 1776, the Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. This document articulated the colonies' reasons for breaking away and outlined principles that would shape their new political identity. It framed the conflict not only as a dispute with Britain but as part of a larger struggle for rights and self-governance. The war that followed was complex and extended over several years. The Continental Army, led by George Washington, faced significant challenges. It lacked the resources, training, and structure of the British military. Maintaining morale and cohesion under these conditions required careful leadership and adaptability. Early campaigns revealed both the strengths and limitations of colonial forces. British strategy initially focused on decisive engagements and control of key cities. They achieved some success, including the capture of New York. However, holding territory proved difficult. The vast geography of the colonies, combined with local resistance, complicated British efforts. Meanwhile, the Continental Army adopted strategies that balanced confrontation with caution, avoiding engagements that could lead to significant losses. International involvement became a critical factor. France, observing the conflict, saw an opportunity to challenge British power. Following the American victory at Saratoga in 1777, France formally entered the war as an ally of the colonies. This support provided essential resources, naval power, and legitimacy. Other nations, including Spain, also became involved in ways that further strained British capacity. The war extended beyond the colonies themselves. It became part of a broader global conflict, stretching British resources across multiple theaters. This shift altered the strategic landscape. While British forces remained formidable, their ability to concentrate efforts in North America was reduced. In the southern colonies, the conflict took on a different character. British forces aimed to capitalize on perceived loyalist support, seeking to regain control through a series of campaigns. These efforts achieved temporary gains but also encountered resistance. The nature of the conflict in the South included both formal military engagements and localized fighting, reflecting divisions within colonial society. By the early 1780s, the cumulative effects of sustained resistance, international alliances, and strategic challenges began to shift momentum. The campaign that concluded at Yorktown in 1781 marked a decisive moment. Combined American and French forces surrounded a British army, leading to its surrender. While not the end of all hostilities, this event significantly weakened Britain's position. Negotiations followed, resulting in the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Britain recognized the independence of the United States, formally ending the conflict. The outcome represented a significant transformation. A group of colonies had successfully separated from an established empire and established a new nation based on principles articulated during the struggle. The consequences of the revolution extended beyond political independence. The new nation faced the challenge of building a stable government. The initial framework, established under the Articles of Confederation, reflected caution about centralized authority. Over time, this system revealed limitations, leading to the development of the Constitution in 1787. This document created a more balanced structure of governance, combining federal and state powers. Social and economic changes also followed. The revolution influenced ideas about rights and representation, though its impact varied across different groups. Discussions about liberty and equality became more prominent, even as contradictions remained within society. The institution of slavery, for example, continued despite the principles expressed during the Revolution, highlighting tensions that would persist. Internationally, the success of the American colonies had a broader impact. It demonstrated that a challenge to established imperial authority could succeed under certain conditions. The ideas expressed during the revolution influenced political movements in other parts of the world. While each context differed, the example of the American experience contributed to ongoing debates about governance, rights, and national identity. The revolution also reshaped Britain's approach to its remaining empire. Lessons drawn from the conflict influenced future policies, including adjustments in how colonial relationships were managed. The loss of the American colonies did not end British imperial ambitions, but it prompted reconsideration of strategies and priorities. Looking back, the American Revolution was not a single event but a process that unfolded over years of tension, conflict, and change. It involved